Now, with all the very latest from around the world and here at home, it's the ITV News at 10.
Will the planned surge in delivering boosters help fight the new variants but deliver more problems for the NHS? There are warnings tonight that the government's massive plan to invite everyone over 18 to get a third jab will come at a cost for the health service.
If we're going to deliver up boosters, then we need to know what we have to stop doing, because we've got a day job to do.
After the PM urged us not to cancel Christmas, questions about festive parties at Downing Street during lockdown last Christmas.
The Prime Minister doesn't deny there was a Downing Street Christmas party last year.
All guidance was followed completely during number 10.
Also in News at 10 tonight. 30,000 left in the cold for a sixth night as power companies admit they weren't prepared for the scale of Storm Arwen. Ghislaine Maxwell's lawyers try to pick apart testimonies of the women who say she groomed them for abuse. A potential tipping point in America's half-century struggle over abortion rights as the conservative Supreme Court hears calls to allow a 15-week limit. And
so I'd have to be an astronaut of my own. I have my own
the curious incident of Connor Curren and how autism is no barrier to your dreams of being on stage.
It'll inspire people, it'll educate people, and ultimately build more empathy for other communities that haven't had their time on the stage, and I think that's a beautiful thing.
This is ITV News at 10 with Rageh Omaar.
Good evening. The impact and implications of a sudden rush to give boosters to every adult were felt across the NHS today. In GP surgeries and in hospitals, doctors believe that prioritising COVID vaccinations could once again mean delays to other vital treatments. And yet one group of scientists who advise the government say mask wearing and travel restrictions are not enough to combat the potential spread of the new Omicron strain. One told us he and many of his colleagues think there should be a ban on large Christmas parties. An awkward situation, to say the least, for the Prime Minister, who found himself answering questions in Parliament about a party in Downing Street last Christmas when people were not allowed to meet up indoors. Mr Johnson would only say that all guidance had been followed.
We were asked to roll up our sleeves and join the national effort. That message appears to have been taken seriously here in Eastleigh, where this church has been converted into a vaccine centre and was heaving.
Last 2 days since the announcements were made, it's been really, really busy, and we've had lots of people walking in and trying to get a vaccination on the off chance.
Surgeries will have to help deliver the massive booster campaign, which will offer every adult a jab by the end of January. But many GPs can't see how on earth they'll do it.
If we're going to deliver up boosters, then we need to know what we have to stop doing, because we've got a day job to do. That work doesn't go away. Those people that we would then not be seeing in those few weeks will still need to be seen. So it just pushes the problem further down the road.
So patient care is going to suffer?
Potentially, yes, unless extensive workforce is found quite quickly, because we can't do it all.
And that is the worry. This is a service that is already almost at breaking point, and it's not just here in primary care, but in hospitals too, just at a time when they're desperately trying to clear the backlog. Their focus now has to turn to the booster campaign.
The government does at least acknowledge they're asking a lot in order to defend us against Omicron.
Now we're asking them to do a lot more through the step up in the national vaccination programme. I know that they're up to it, but we want to make sure they're provided with all the support that's needed. That includes the volunteers, the 500 or so personnel we're getting help from in terms of the military personnel, but it's about all of us working together.
Are your restrictions tough enough, Prime Minister? Should we cancel Christmas parties?
They're questions the government is also facing, and in the Commons the Prime Minister was pressed on his own alleged Christmas parties last year.
As millions of people were locked down last year, was a Christmas party thrown in Downing Street for dozens of people on December the 18th?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, what I can tell the right honourable gentleman is that all guidance was followed completely during Number 10.
Christmas parties are again under threat this year. It's emerged a key group of scientists who advised the government warned last week the introduction of the Omicron variant would likely be capable of initiating a new wave of infections. They go on. We cannot exclude that this wave would be of a magnitude similar or even larger than previous waves. One member of that advisory group, speaking in a personal capacity, told me he's pretty clear about how to prepare for it.
We would say that we need to put in place additional precautions and would advise against large indoor gatherings, particularly under noisy circumstances or in poorly ventilated areas.
So you would suggest that things like Christmas parties and big family gatherings or social gatherings are cancelled?
I think many of us feel that we wouldn't feel safe to go ahead with large Christmas parties.
Tonight in Downing Street, amid the confusion about whether parties should be on or off, the government stood firm. Don't cancel them, but take a test beforehand just to be safe. Emily Morgan, News at 10.
And Robert is in his studio ahead of tonight's Peston programme. Robert, I guess we have to return to those accusations of a Downing Street Christmas party during last December's restrictions. No denial from the PM that it happened, but he says it was within the rules. What do you make of that?
Well, it definitely happened, certainly according to my sources. And Downing Street's, the Prime Minister's official spokesman came up with, I think, the sort of lamest rejoinder when asked about it. He said he didn't recognise the version of events as published in the Daily Mirror this morning. Again, not exactly a denial. Now, you know, I'm told, you know, to all intents and purposes, everybody was there, thought it was a party. There was drinking and fun to be had. And if you remember at the time, we were all told that we weren't allowed to engage in parties of that sort. Now, you know, you were allowed to mix with people at work. So maybe that is the pinhead that the, you know, the Prime Minister is dancing on when saying they didn't break any rules. But I think in terms of the spirit of what we were supposed to be doing back then, so, you know, a lot of people will be surprised, some people angry with what took place in Downing Street. I mean, there is this perception that there's sort of one rule for the government and another rule for the rest of us. Actually, I've got Matt Hancock on my show tonight, just spoken to him, and I asked him, you know, why, when he broke the rules on mixing with people outside of his immediate family, his immediate bubble. You remember that clinch with an aide of his? He didn't resign immediately. It took him 24 hours. Initially, he just made an apology and, you know, was obviously trying to tough it out. He claimed he didn't resign because, you know, the damage he'd done to his sort of personal life, it took him a while to work out the right thing to do. You can watch the interview in just a bit and decide whether you think that's credible or not.
We certainly will, Robert. Thank you very much indeed. One solution to the problems of social care in England was outlined by the government today. More help so people can stay in their own homes. £300 million will be spent on home improvements, live-in, walk-in showers. There'll be £150 million for technology like sensors and alarms to monitor those in care homes, and more training for carers. Is that it? Labour asked. The plans did nothing, Labour said, to tackle the urgent problems of staff shortages.
SYLVIA is living with cancer. Her daughter Sue has it as well. Yet she must also care for her disabled dad Barry. The family share just a small flat and a constant need for care.
It is hard. It's hard for her. And it shouldn't be. And I just got nowhere to go. I'm just stuck in here. As I say, I'm here 24/7. I don't go out.
When did you last get a break?
Last I got a break, I was in hospital 2 weeks ago.
That was a break?
Yeah, that was a break for me. Yeah.
To give everyone a break, the home requires a list of adaptations almost as long as their list of medications.
Because he has got an electric chair, but he can't use it because it's too big to use in the flat.
You just need a bit more space,
yeah,
don't
more
you?
space, yeah.
And everything lowered. And...
Yeah, yeah.
Today, the government announced more money to help with that as part of a long-promised plan to reform care. It includes £300 million for better housing, £150 million to improve technology and £500 million for staff, though that part has previously been announced.
What today's Adult Social Care White Paper is about is setting out a 10-year vision for world-beating adult social care reform with control and choice and support at its heart.
But the vision for the future does little to help with the unprecedented staffing crisis care is seeing now. We last filmed with Christine in September.
These carers are all, shattered. We need help.
She doesn't feel she's got it today.
I'd like to take the government that sits in Parliament out with us and see what they can see out there, what we're actually up against.
You don't think they've been listening?
No, not at all.
Then in the evening we've got that full run to cover.
Back at headquarters, her company currently has 120 vacancies. They do not expect today's plan to fill them.
If I'm honest, I was hoping for something a bit more radical. And what we've heard so far, obviously I haven't seen the detail of it, there's a bit of money, but if you look at the sums, they're not transformational.
To better staff the sector, the real reform needed is to wages. Without more investment, it is the vulnerable who'll pay the price. Paul Brand, News at 10, Somerset.
The issue of Tory sleaze won't go away, with two more names added to the list of Conservative MPs being investigated by Parliament's Standards Commissioner. One is the leader of the House, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Labour say he didn't properly declare two loans worth £6 million from his own companies. Mr Rees-Mogg said he did. He reportedly used it to do up his house in London. The other is Douglas Ross, the Conservative leader in Scotland. He'd already referred himself to the Commission for failing to declare what he had earned from two other jobs. There is still no end in sight for the thousands of people in northern England and Scotland left without power after Storm Arwen cut through their communities. It's left many desperately worrying about when supplies will be restored. The government says it is doing everything it can. Around 30,000 homes are in the dark again tonight for a sixth night inside. People are forced to live in coats, woolly hats and as many blankets as they can find.
Dressed for the outdoors because it's just as cold inside her home. This is the only way Jade can have hot water and the only way to keep her baby warm. Preparing for a sixth night without power, it's not just the cold keeping her awake at night.
It's been awful and it's made me feel just so guilty as a parent that, I can't provide my kids with warmth and with hot food. They're coming down in the morning and it's pitch black and they're cold and I've got to run around getting the fire and everything stoked. I'm throwing blankets and jackets over them to keep them warm, trying to get the baby warm and that. It's just made me feel desperate.
The storm hit 5 days ago, but it was one of the worst in decades. Gale force winds and heavy snow have left thousands without power. This hospice in Northumberland is managing to run on a generator, but even that may run out soon.
Our fear is that the generator breaks down, packs up, and then we really would be in trouble. We have to feed patients, keep people warm, look after people to a very high standard of care, and if that generator goes, we won't be able to do it.
All anyone wants to know is when they'll be reconnected. Today in the House of Commons, the business secretary was asked if the problems could last till Christmas.
The isolated communities point is something which I take extremely seriously. Being without power until Christmas is simply unacceptable.
As engineers assess the power lines from the air, though, it's clear to see the extent of the damage. Miles of cables are still down, but working conditions to fix them are challenging too.
We're having an emergency ourselves. I mean, this is, for us, we pride ourselves on being able to get out there and do it for them. And very often we're able to do that. This thing was just too big for us.
And it's not just homes, but businesses that are affected too. After closing because of the pandemic, now it's because they have no power.
Inside my stock, preparation food, everything, throw them away. It's clear the fridge, everything has to be gone.
It's some of the worst hit and most remote areas now, though, that still have to wait as they brace for another night of freezing temperatures. Sangita News at 10, Blanchland.
Police investigating the death of a 16-year-old Amber Gibson from Hamilton, southeast of Glasgow, have this evening made an arrest. He's a 19-year-old man. Amber left her home at about 9:15 on Friday night and was seen in the town centre just before 10. The police say it would have been busy at that time of night. Her body was found on Sunday morning in a local park. Little by little, the evidence of the key prosecution witness in the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell was teased apart today by Miss Maxwell's own lawyers. The woman who says Miss Maxwell was involved when the New York financier Jeffrey Epstein sexually abused her as a 14-year-old insisted she had not made up her evidence. Emma has been in court again this evening. Emma, what have you heard?
Well, this was the day for the defence team to deconstruct the prosecution's opening arguments and their key witness, a woman called Jane, who claims that she was the youngest of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's victims. Now, she was picked apart on the stand in a really brutal way about evidence that she'd given to the court yesterday compared with statements that she'd made in previous years. First of all, in previous statements, she said that Ghislaine Maxwell was not present and had not touched her during any kind of sexual encounter. In court yesterday, she said that she had. She was also asked about evidence that she gave that said that Ghislaine Maxwell was involved with being in the room when sex acts were carried out by Jeffrey Epstein. Yesterday, she said yesterday she said yes, she was. In previous comments, she said no, she wasn't. There was also another key piece of evidence, and it related to the first time the group met and travelled here to New York. The witness was asked when that was. She said she was 14 years old, and it was back in 1994 to watch the opening of The Lion King on Broadway. The defence team pointed out that that didn't open until 1997, in which case she would have been 17. At one point, there was another issue relating to ages and dates, and the witness said that she thought it was just a small technicality. Well, the problem with cases like this and all legal cases is that small technicalities have very big consequences.
And Emma, there's more testimony which links high-profile names which are going to come up in the cross-examination, aren't there?
Yes, indeed. It wouldn't be this case unless there was a new name every day. And today we heard for a second time that she was presented to Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago when she was 14. And she also flew on Jeffrey Epstein's private jet, the Lolita Express, at the same time as Prince Andrew.
Thank you, Emma, in New York. And once again this year, any hope of the British-Iranian woman Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe being released in time for Christmas is a forlorn one. Today, I was given an insight into the thinking of the Iranian leadership on the diplomatic deadlock when I met its ambassador to London. He told me Western countries could not, on the one hand, accuse Iran of supporting terrorism and violating human rights, and then appeal to Iran for talks when it wanted something. A photo of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe seemingly looking at ease under house arrest in Iran, but notice the tracking device on her ankle. A dual Iranian and British citizen, she has been held in Iran for nearly 6 years under multiple accusations, from trying to topple the Iranian government to spreading propaganda. Today, I spoke with Iran's ambassador to London.
Salam, hello, ambassador.
About Tehran's resumption of nuclear talks with Western powers, including Britain, and about whether Mrs. Zaghari-Ratcliffe is being used as a human bargaining chip.
I have to observe the laws and regulations of my country, and we are not happy that somebody remains in jail or is deprived from the liberty. I mean, that doesn't add something to us. But we have to observe the procedural issues. We cannot judge on the substance of a case because we are not judge and we don't know the detail of the file.
It's not in the interest of Iran. It's certainly not in the interest of the Zaghari-Ratcliffe family or Britain. What can be done to resolve this in a way that helps and satisfies everyone, especially the family of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe?
You have to see the diplomacy and relationship between the two countries as a package. It is very bizarre that when we are facing some of the countries, for example, in the Western countries, they consider you as a supporting of terrorism. They call you the violator of human rights. They tell you that you are making a mess in the region. And when it comes to the bilateral issues, or we have something, you just ask that country to be very nice. I mean, that's a package.
Nazanin's husband, Richard, went on a 3-week hunger strike to bring attention to his wife's case.
Nazanin always has been a bargaining chip within a wider relationship. She's been used to signal political issues around the debt. She's been used to signal displeasure in the UK-Iran relationship more generally. So, I mean, I guess I interpret that to mean him saying, listen, if you want to have Nazanin home, then, you know, you need to move forward on other issues.
As world powers, including Britain, negotiate with Iran over its nuclear program in Vienna, there is also a family caught in the middle of this struggle of interests that ultimately serves none of them. The constitutional right to an abortion in the United States was secured way back in 1973 in the Supreme Court in a landmark ruling known as Roe v. Wade. Now, individual Republican states are challenging that ruling by passing their own anti-abortion laws, like Mississippi. It has brought its case before what is now an overwhelmingly conservative Supreme Court for the first time in a generation.
When life begins has been hotly debated since the beginning of time.
They adopt a right that purposefully leads to the termination of now millions of human lives.
They're questions that tear America apart. Fought out today in the Supreme Court and in the court's shadow, where opposing sides unite on one point only, that this is a pivotal moment.
This is absurd. It is outrageous that we are forcing people into pregnancies that they do not want to be in.
The 9-member court, recast by Donald Trump and minded, many believe, to rewrite the rules.
Today is very special to us because for the first time in so many years we think that there's a possibility of abortion returning to the legislative branches in the states.
Do what's right today and serve Jesus. Save your child's life. Don't commit murder today.
The state in question is deep in the Bible Belt.
The Bible says that child is created in God's image, ma'am.
Where Christian campaigners try to win over patients with little success, arriving at Mississippi's last abortion clinic, and pray that America is moving towards a total ban.
All life is life, and all of it, every person, you, myself, and the unborn child, are all created in the image of God. Why are we trying to determine how old the child has to be before we can kill it?
Roe v. Wade set the abortion limit at the point where life becomes viable, now judged to be 24 weeks. Earlier this year, legislation in Texas allowed anyone involved in an abortion after 6 weeks to be sued. But Mississippi's state-enforced law poses a fundamental challenge to Roe v. Wade by cutting the time limit to 15 weeks. And if it's upheld by the Supreme Court, then it could trigger a further 25 Republican states to move against abortion.
That's my baby.
KAYLA Roberts is a loving mother, but she ended her first pregnancy. She was just 15 years old, too young and too poor, she says, to cope with a child.
Like you can see, it's human rights, women's rights. No, and the people in the Supreme Court is mostly, to me, men. What to do with their body?
It may well be that America's abortion laws are on notice, but that won't settle the issue nor heal the Great Divide. John Ray, News at 10.
Well, still in the US, the American author Alice Sebold based her first book on the terrible experience of being raped when she was a student. The man she identified as the rapist was sent to jail and served 16 years. He's been out for more than 20, but only 10 days ago, his conviction was overturned. Now, Alice Sebold has apologized, saying she never wanted a young man's life to be ruined by the very crime that had ruined hers.
This court grants defendant's motion.
This is the moment Anthony Broadwater was cleared of a crime he didn't commit more than 4 decades ago. He spent 16 years in prison and has only now been exonerated of the rape conviction that he says has ruined his life. The enormity and emotion of it all are overwhelming.
I couldn't help but cry. The relief that a district attorney of that magnitude would side with me.
My name is Salmon, like the fish.
Okay, shipmate, take it away. The woman he was convicted of raping went on to become a best-selling author. Her book, The Lovely Bones, was made into this Oscar-nominated film.
I was 14 years old.
Alice Sebold was an 18-year-old college student when she was raped. She didn't pick Anthony Broadwater out of a police lineup, but did identify him as her attacker at his subsequent trial. Today, she apologised to him, saying, "As a traumatised 18-year-old rape victim, I chose to put my faith in the American legal system. My goal in 1982 was justice, not to perpetuate injustice, and certainly not to forever and irreparably alter a young man's life by the very crime that had altered mine." Anthony Broadwater's wrongful conviction only came to light after a producer working on a film adaptation of Sebold's memoir raised questions about the case and hired a private investigator.
When one reads the transcript, even somebody with no legal training will see that this was just a travesty of a trial.
Anthony Broadwater's lawyers were able to prove that he was convicted on the basis of insufficient and now discredited scientific evidence. Who does he blame for what happened to him?
At the end of the day, his fight isn't necessarily with her. It's the people that provided her with ill guidance. The people that she thought were there to get her justice led her into committing a grave injustice against Tony. So his issue and our issue is with the state of New York.
Mr. Broadwater.
We know now that there are 2 victims in this terrible story and 1 perpetrator whose identity may never be known. Chloe Keedy, News at 10.
The organisation that runs women's tennis has suspended all its tournaments in China over the treatment of the country's own star Peng Shuai. Peng had disappeared from public view after she accused a former member of the communist government of sexually assaulting her while she appeared on videos released by the government. The WTA says it doubts she is free or safe. It also worried about the risks to other players. Finally, when CURREN was growing up, he wanted to be an actor. He indeed has autism and never saw anyone with the condition in any of the TV programmes, films or stage plays he watched. But now he will be able to inspire a new generation. He's landed the lead role in the National Theatre production of The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. Not bad for his professional stage debut.
So I'd have to be an astronaut of my own. I have my own part of the spacecraft which no one else could come into.
The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime is a glimpse into the mind of a boy who has characteristics similar to autism, as he tries to make sense of the world around him. And for the first time, this production has an actor with autism in the lead role, CURREN, making his professional stage debut.
It's a huge honour, obviously, to be offered the role. I had to pinch myself to see if I was dreaming. You often think this is an extrovert's or, a neurotypical person's game. You sort of get taught that, so you kind of think, oh, I'm not really supposed to be here. Maybe I'm supposed to do something, like if you're talking in the stereotypical sort of past view of what a neurodivergent person would do, you would think something academic. And, I'm not necessarily that type of person, so, you didn't think that you had a place here.
My name is Christopher John Francis Boone.
The National Theatre's production is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year with a tour. And for the first time, it put out a casting notice looking specifically for actors with neurodiversity, a broad term referring to conditions ranging from dyslexia to autism.
I'm happy that it's happening. I suppose, obviously, you would have liked to have seen it, done 10, 20 years ago. Especially when I was a kid, and seeing another autistic actor on stage would have been great.
Have you ever had a time when people have not even realised that you are someone who has autism? And
yeah.
How did that make you feel?
Yeah, most people, probably most of the time. I think that's probably because they have a preconceived notion of what autism is.
Plays like this are helping to change those notions, and a pause in production due to lockdowns gave the National Theatre time to realise it was time to improve representation.
And it'll inspire people, it'll educate people, and ultimately build more empathy.
This production's on tour until January the 9th. Sejal Karia, News at 10.
Well done, Karen. And that's it for tonight. Thank you for watching and good night.
Tomorrow.